spirits guide me.
Hello, Peter Forsan Azir here, Cyrus, and welcome to my review of Untitled Twilight of the Spirits. As I was thinking of what games I wanted to review, I thought it would be fun to review a few titles that aren't all that well known, and the first game to come to mind was Untitled Twilight of the Spirits. I find that the overall Untitled series isn't that well known, but I decided to review the fourth game in the series since, well, it's the only game in the series that I own. Anyway, how I got the game is pretty similar to how I got Radiata Stories. I saw the cover, looked pretty cool. The title was also pretty cool as well. But the ultimate question is, how does Untitled Twilight of the Spirits hold up? Well, let's find out and start this review. Untitled Twilight of the Spirit is a strategy RPG that was developed by Cattle and published by Sony. It is available on the PS2.
Hang on, we're not finished yet. How's that?
Well done.
Visually, the game looks pretty good. Well, considering that this game was released in 2003, I have to say that the visuals has aged pretty well. Character models looks good, and the art style is decent for the Deimos character and the lore surrounding them. Oh yeah, and the Deimos is basically a race of humanoids that have a striking resemblance to monsters. I also know that humans and Deimos pretty much despise each other, so yeah. The human characters and the lore surrounding them in this game are pretty standard, art style wise. Environments also look good for the most part, with there being a wide range of environments you get to go through when you go through the game. Visual wise, Untitled Twilight of the Spirits really do well here. Story wise, the game is split into a dual storyline, with you playing as Karg for one side and Dark as the other side. For Karg's story, the overall plot is him basically trying to protect his fellow countrymen from any sort of threats, like the Deimos, most notably. Yeah, I say country, but it's really just protecting Yellbell, since Yellbell is really the only town in that continent. Well, human town at least. Dark's story is him basically getting enough power to become the ultimate Deimos and unite all the Deimos in an attempt to destroy the humans in order to save Deimos in the world. Overall, the story is good when looking at it as a whole, but if you were to ask me how I feel about the two arcs individually, I'd probably say I found Dark's arc to be pretty interesting, with not only for his journey of being the ultimate Deimos, but also with how the other Deimos treat Dark, since he is a half Deimos and half human. Karg's story is okay, for the most part. Am I saying Karg's story is bad? No, I'm not. It's just very standard for the most part. Though Karg's arc does get more interesting when a certain review is played out, which is when Karg and Dark's path do sort of collide, but overall, Karg's story is pretty standard. Though I do think the story does get more interesting as you see Karg's and Dark's path collide more when you go through the story. So overall, I liked it, though it does take time for both arcs to get going. Character wise, I do think it's a pretty good at this department as well, with each character in your party, or both main characters, being pretty likable and interesting, especially with how the characters in Dark's party and Karg's party actually got a direct rivalry each other, except for one character on both sides. But even with those one character in both parties that don't have hostility with each other, they do interact with each other, which is pretty nice. So overall, I do like the characters of this game. Well, except for one, which is Lilina. Which is not to say she's a bad character, I just find her a bit bland. And that's a bit of a problem when a decent amount of story kind of revolves around here. Well, the later part of the story at least. But overall, even with Lilina, I would say I really like the characters in this game. Though I probably do find that the Deimos character are more interesting than a human character. Which kinda did want me to get through the human side as quickly as possible in order to go to the Deimos side, so it is kinda more interesting. Voice acting wise, the game is iffy to okay. There are some voices I like, such as Quentin Fling, voicing Karg, but there are some voices I found iffy in the voice direction, like Paulette's voice. It's okay for the most part, and there's not that much voice acting in general, but it can feel a bit step back to comparison to other RPGs that has voice acting in it, in the PS2 library. Soundtrack is pretty good, and there are some pretty memorable tracks in it, such as the Natural Selection track, Ordeal. I do find the main theme that plays when you start the game to be fairly good. Overall, the presentation of Arc the Lad, Twilight of the Spirit is good, with the characters, story, and visuals, but it does fall a bit short in the voice acting department.
Limitless darkness, weave your despair. Dark extreme.
Gameplay wise, the game plays kind of like a strategy RPG, where you got your main characters on the map and move them in the field in order to defeat the enemy. The game uses an attack turn system where both the player units and enemy units have a set turn, which can be determined by a player's stat, or it can be manipulated by certain actions, though you probably won't be manipulating the turn order much through certain actions in this game. In battle, you're able to move within the blue area once your character's turn to move, attack, do special attack, / magic, use items, or retreat. Well, the retreat's really only used for random encounters, so yeah. There's also the HP, experience, and tension bar you have to take account to. HP and experience is self-explanatory, while the tension bar determines if you're able to do a dual attack, which will activate when the tension bar is full, and when two of your allies is in range of the enemy you're attacking. Also note that the tension attack only requires one character tension bar to be full. There's also the Spirit Stone mechanic, which is pretty much the MP equivalent of this game. The Spirit Stone mechanic is pretty much how you expect MP is handled in other games, how it's used for special attacks and magic. But how you get Spirit Stones is really different how you get MP in other games, since how to get Spirit Stones, it's like an item, and you really have to conserve how much Spirit Stones you have and distribute them properly, since Spirit Stones doesn't really regen like how MP does when you attack or just walk around or rest. And the only real way to get more Spirit Stones is either buying them or randomly finding them in the field or finding them in a treasure chest. Also note that each character can really only carry a set amount of Spirit Stones in battle, while the excess Spirit Stones you get will get stored. And that's all there is to the combat system. Well, more or less. Now, you're probably wondering why I say it kind of played like a strategy RPG at my attempt to describe this game at the start. Well, that's mostly because it plays more like a traditional RPG than a strategy RPG. I guess you can call it a strategy RPG because of how the game kind of takes place in the grid-like map, which does put emphasis on positioning. Well, it's not really grid-like, but I think you know what I mean. But the game doesn't really offer all that much strategy in terms of mechanics compared to traditional turn-based strategy RPGs like Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Ogre, Hydra Union, We Will Never Fight Alone. It's more comparable to a traditional RPG than strategy RPGs in my opinion. But having said that, is Arc the Lad Twilight of the Spirit's combat system bad? No, it's not. The combat system does have depth with the emphasis on positioning. The use of tension bar is also a nice mechanic, which also adds to how the game uses a dual storyline between Karg and Dark, well, at least to me. And the Spirit Stone mechanic is a pretty interesting way to handle MP, in that you have to use a bit of item management in order to get enough Spirit Stones to go through the game, which is pretty different with how MP is usually handled, in that you really only need to walk around, attack without using magic or resting at in order to restore your MP. The item management with how Spirit Stone is handled is restricting enough that you have to be smart with item management kind of, but I don't think it's too restricting that it takes fun out of the combat system. It just adds a bit more depth to it. And I do think the Spirit Stone mechanic does immerse the player into the game a bit more, since it does show just how precious the Spirit Stone really is in a gameplay point of view, which really adds to the narrative, since, well, the story is constantly telling you that Spirit Stones is the most precious resources in the game, lore-wise. So really, I think it really adds to the enjoyment of the game as well. Anyway, I got a bit too off tangent with the Spirit Stone mechanic. The other thing is the character you use in battle are pretty different from each other, and that you'll be using their strengths and weaknesses in order to overcome the enemy. And overall, I say I enjoyed the combat system of Untitled Twilight of the Spirits. It had fun with it when I was going through the game. Though the combat does have some flaws, which really gets down to its interface. The combat interface is a bit clunky, with the game not really providing you with any way to find out the turn order list, and for a game that uses an attack turn system, that's a bit iffy. No way to know how long a buff or debuff lasts, or lacking the ability to pan the camera out so we can have a better view on the battlefield. These factors can really make going through the battle more of a pain than it needs to be. But overall, I don't think the issue really deter me from having fun with the combat most of the time. It's just mildly annoying. Overall, the combat system is pretty fun, got a good amount of depth to it. I do think it's a pretty unique combat system. Leveling system wise, the game uses a traditional leveling system where you get experience for fighting monsters or enemies, and when you get enough, level up, which get you stat boost. You also get SP points, which you can use to learn your special skills and level up your skill level, which will unlock even more skills. The leveling system overall is pretty good, even if it's rather traditional. Customization is pretty decent. While you don't have a different subtype of weapons you can use, like having different amount of swords or having different amount of whips, you really only have one sword, one whip for each character. You do get weapon parts and armor parts, which will affect the overall stats of your weapon and armor. You can also add special effects to them as well, such as sleep. You can customize the airship and Pyron, which you can use in battle. So overall, I think the customization is pretty decent. Exploration wise, it's a pretty linear game, though there is a decent amount of side content which will let you go back to previous areas. Well, just really the Colosseum, but I do think the Colosseum battles are worth it, just for the extra characters, you know. Oh yeah, one tip. If you're going through the game, I would do the arena battle on Castanina before chapter 6, before ending chapter 6 of Karg's story. Since after that part, you can't go back to that place. And if you can't go back to that place, you lose a possible ally, since you can get an extra ally in that arena battle. So yeah, just thought I would let you know. The dungeon design is also pretty standard for the most part. Except for one dungeon. Which gets me to remember why I haven't replayed the game. For you see, when I was replaying the game a bit for this review, I always wondered why I haven't replayed the game for all the years I had it. I had fun with it. I always wondered why I didn't replay it. Then I loaded the save file and remembered why. The final dungeon in Untitled Twilight of the Spirits is one of the worst final dungeons I have ever played in an RPG. Oh man, do I hate this final dungeon. Most of the areas in the final dungeon looks the same, and there's no way to get any bearing when you're going through the game. So you just be randomly wandering through it, just hoping you're going the right way. And to top it off, the visual design of this final dungeon is so bland. Oh, did I mention the best part of this dungeon? It's a pretty long dungeon. Oh my goodness, do I hate this final dungeon. Likewise, it took me about 40 to 50 hours to complete the game. Difficulty wise, I put on the monitor to a bit difficult on the difficulty scale, though I did found Dark's arc to be a bit more harder than Karg's. Overall, the gameplay is pretty good, the combat being pretty fun, leveling system is pretty good, and the customization being pretty decent. Though there are a few issues that might sour the experience, like the interface system for combat, and the final dungeon. Overall, Untitled Twilight of the Spirits is a fun and enjoyable experience. The story is good, and the dual storyline was pretty interesting to me at the time, and I didn't really play much games that had it. The characters interesting, well, most of them. The visuals are pretty good, considering when it was released, and the gameplay is pretty fun, with the combat system and customization. There are a few cons, such as the interface for the battle system being clunky, the voice acting being iffy, the final dungeon! But in the end, I say it's an enjoyable game. So, I say check it out if you ever find a copy of the game. Though I would avoid Arc the Lad End of Darkness, which is its sequel, since I heard that it's not particularly good, or even decent. So yeah.